the Madman! Welcome to more Saviors of Uldum cards. We're gonna start with a very spicy one indeed. Priest gets some love with High Priest Amit, a 4-mana 2/7 legendary. Whenever you summon a minion, set its health equal to this minion's. Wow. What a combination that is when Amit himself is already a 7 health minion. I mean, let me just start off by saying the 4-mana 2/7 stat line is slightly competitive. It's likely to survive, how about that? The 4-mana 2/7, don't laugh at it, and past even likely to survive. It's got an immediate effect when you play it alongside stuff, or when you play it when you already have reborn type minions on the board. I feel like this card fits into one of two archetypes. First archetype, and the archetype that most people are thinking of, is Amit OTK. It's simple. You play High Priest Amit, you play Divine Spirit on Amit, you play Divine Spirit on Amit. That is a 2/28. And then you play something like a boar. The boar has 28 health alongside Amit. You'll play a Topsy-Turvy or an Inner Fire on your board, you attack for 28. That's nice. Not that hard to imagine a 5-card combo dealing 28 damage. Like, that's pretty solid. But past that, there's a second deck that could use this. And that would be a Zoo-type Priest deck. It's a simple idea. You play a bunch of low-cost cards. Somewhere in the mid-game, let's say turn 6, you play High Priest Amit. I'll sneak peek the next card. You trade in your Grand Mummy, give the High Priest Amit +1/+1, so it's a 3/8. Grand Mummy comes back, it's a 1/8. And then you play with your extra 2 mana, and I'm just going to give a bad example here because there's better things you can do. Murloc Tidehunter, you just casually get a 2/8 and a 1/8 with it. For 2 mana, you have actually summoned 19 stats worth of minions. So yeah, watch out for this card in both the combo varieties, as well as I think the Zoo variety. And the Zoo just might be real. And let's go right into Grand Mummy. Speaking of the Zoo might be real. 2 mana, 1/2 Priest minion. It's got Reborn, Death Rattle, give a random friendly minion +1/+1. Boy, is that a strong pull towards Zoo. Grand Mummy cannot buff its own Reborn after it dies, sadly. Otherwise, it would be really disgusting. But in a situation where you're playing 1-drop something, like maybe Northshire Claire, and then turn 2 Grand Mummy, there's a decent chance that the Grand Mummy isn't the target of your opponents because they have to get rid of your turn 1 play. So you could then on turn 3 play another card and then send the Grand Mummy in, buff the 3 mana card, or your multiple minions that you played, and then you still have another Grand Mummy still on deck with a 1/1 Death Rattle, give a random friendly minion +1/+1. Tough for your opponent to deal with all of this. Grand Mummy, if you get the full value out of it, is 4/5 worth of stats. 1/2 plus the 1/1 Reborn plus the 2/2 that you get from the Death Rattle twice. I mean, 2 mana for a 4/5 with full potential, like that's obviously just really strong. Just the question of whether or not a Zoo Priest core can build around this. Now for a slightly less exciting mummy, it's the Generous Mummy. 3 mana 5/4 Reborn, your opponent's cards cost 1 less. I do a lot of custom cards, so therefore I like to think about what is the base price of this card without the downside. The 3 mana 5/4 Reborn would obviously be insane. I think this is comparable with Dalaran Crusader as well, which is a 5 mana 5/4 with Divine Shield, often seen in Arena. Reborn could be said to be a type of Divine Shield, because instead of dealing 1 damage and then 4 damage, your goal is to deal 4 damage and then 1 damage. So yeah, I think 5 mana is where the card would be unplayable. So realistically, this card is somewhere valued around 4.5. So now that we have that baseline, surprise, the card costs 3. But it's a card with a drawback, and I like cards with a drawback. This drawback, though, might be a bit too much. Essentially, if your opponent gets 2 discounts out of the Generous Mummy, they're already ahead. And what are the chances that they're going to get 2 cards? Pretty high, especially since Generous Mummy has Reborn. In fact, the Mummy might be so generous that the opponent decides to not kill your Generous Mummy, and then they're getting some serious discounts. When you trade your Generous Mummy, you can't even fully remove it from your own board because it's Reborn. Basically, where this card belongs is in exactly co-op Brawl. And I do believe that we're gonna see Generous Mummy see play in co-op Brawl. Colossus of the Moon. Big legendary here. 10 mana, 10/10. Divine Shield Reborn. That is not a lot of text on a legendary card, but I will make an argument that this is actually good design for a legendary in sparse numbers. By the way, the Reborn synergizes really well with the Divine Shield because after you kill the Colossus of the Moon, which is pretty difficult, you gotta get through the Divine Shield and 10 health, it reborns as a 10 mana 10-1 with Divine Shield. And if you have healing, you can heal the Colossus of the Moon back up to a 10-10. So the bad news is there are some things that get around, you know, having to deal 1 damage and then 10 health and 1 damage and 1 health, Brawl and Deadly Shot and then all those cheaty kill everything spells, especially Hex and Polymorph. Where this card is probably the absolute scariest though, and this card might not see any competitive play, but it's going to see some play. Almost all of the Conjure Calling mage decks right now run Sea Giant in their deck. Sea Giant costs 10. You play Conjurer's Calling, you could get a Colossus of the Moon, and let me tell you, that is terrifying. It seems like that the way, if you want to play Colossus of the Moon competitively, is going to be cheating it out, and I'll defend the legendary status of this card. I am sure that there has been a lot of testing about cards and how much people like them. There has been a card like this in the past. It's called Tyrantus, which was similarly just a big minion for a class specific with pretty much can't be targeted. Colossus of the Moon serves a very specific role in the game where new players or players who really like big effects, these are called Timmies, they don't really pay much attention to the mana cost or the practicality of running the card. They just see 10 Divine Shield Reborn, and they're like, holy cow, if I play this card, I'm just going to win. And that's a nice design for a neutral card. Essentially, try to cheat this card out, try not to pay 10 mana for it if you want to win. If you don't want to just win, and you want to just play big cards with huge effects, Colossus of the Moon might be the card for you. Plague of Wrath. Warrior 5 mana spell, destroy all damaged minions. We've seen this effect before. It was on King Mosh. King Mosh didn't see that much play. Control Warrior typically needed to get their removal out earlier. So good news, Plague of Wrath is earlier. But it's later than the other card that's similar to this, Sleep with the Fishes. Sleep with the Fishes dealt 3 damage to all damaged minions, which often was enough to kill stuff. We are in a meta where there are some really big things that 3 damage doesn't kill though. So the question then is, can Control Warrior slot in Plague of Wrath? They're not going to lose Brawls because Brawl is insane. They're still going to keep Warpath because Warpath is insane. Warpath does also work well with Plague of Wrath. So the question is there enough room to slot in 1, maybe even 2 Plague of Wrath? Or is that just too much removal? For certain metas where there's a lot of big stuff and 2 Brawls doesn't cut it, I could see. So for really big metas, where there are a lot of big cards out there, and 2 Brawls isn't cutting it, I could see a Plague of Wrath perhaps making it into the Control Warrior decks. We've got Sunstruck Henchman. 4 mana 6/5, at the start of your turn, this has a 50% chance to fall asleep. So as someone who reviews a lot of custom Hearthstone cards, I thought long and hard about what the vanilla stat line for a 4 mana minion should be. And I think a 4 mana 5/5 is fair and could actually see play in competitive Hearthstone. So that's our baseline. So if we establish that 4 mana 5/5 is a baseline for a card to like have a reasonable, decent chance of being put into competitive, this is a 4 mana 6/5. It just has a slight downside that sometimes it falls asleep. Realistically, the 50% chance to fall asleep is pretty hefty and probably means it's not quite going to make the cut. But I'm going to tell you this card, it sucks a lot less than you think it does. And I think in Arena it's actually going to be a monster. In Constructed probably doesn't quite make the cut, but I will say if you're really lucky, then it's pretty good. I think a fair comparison to this card is actually Frozen Crusher. Frozen Crusher is a 6 mana 8/8 that does fall asleep every 2 turns, though you guaranteed get to attack with it the first turn. So for 2 less mana, you have 2-3 less stats and less control over whether or not things fall asleep. But you have to consider this as well. Your opponent has to be scared of your Sunstruck Henchman. They can't just risk leaving it on the board because it could have the ability to attack. So if they're going to play a valuable minion, they have to consider that the Sunstruck Henchman could deal 6 damage to it, so they're going to have to treat the Henchman accordingly. In this respect, the Henchman actually has a lot of subtlety to it. Finally, we have the card that I revealed, Hack the System. Warrior Quest, 1 mana, attack 5 times with your hero, reward, and refit score. And this is actually a very substantial reward. For 2 mana, you summon a 4/3 golem, and after your hero attacks, refresh this. It does refresh every turn normally, of course, but you have the potential to summon 2 4/3 golems each turn if you have a normal weapon, or if you have something like Sorcerer's equipped, you could summon 5 4/3 golems for 10 mana after using every single swing with Sorceress. Speaking of Sorceress is an excellent way to attack 5 times with your hero. With 1 Sorceress, you're already attacking 4 times, potentially. So how good is 2 mana summon a 4/3 golem? Well, let me put it this way. I hit Legend rank 1 with the Paladin upgraded hero power back in the day. So believe me, I know the power of summoning a 4/3. So much value over time, but what's the problem? There might be one specific card overshadowing this card right now. That's right, Dr. Boom Mad Genius, most of his hero powers are worth about the same as this 4/3 golem. It feels like the spot for this card would be distinctly not Control Warrior, because Control Warrior you just run Dr. Boom Mad Genius, where you get to skip going through this quest and you just get a fairly similar effect. Or this card would see play if it does see play, if it's like actually better than the other mid-range decks out there and it somehow beats out Control Warrior, would be in some sort of mid-range aggressive warrior deck. You actually just attack their minions usually with your weapons, and then you send your minions to their face, and then you continue on with some Androfet's Core to supplement your cards in the mid-late game. Downside is you are spending your turn 1 and one of your cards in order to set up Hack the System, but think of it as like preparation. You're setting this up to be pretty strong from turn 7 or 8 onwards. I'm assuming that on average you'll probably complete your quest around then, which is tough because you're setting up a turn 1 play to only pay off around turn 7 or 8 in a mid-range or an aggressive deck. Common cards to activate the Hack the System early would be Woodcutter's Axe, which is probably the likely 2 cost. Sulthraze, maybe Upgrade. Certainly though, I will say that the biggest problem this card faces, it's in direct competition with one of the best buttons in the game, if not the best button in the game right now, of Dr. Boom Mad Genius. So those are the cards for the day. Make sure to watch the Hack the System reveal video if you haven't. I had a lot of fun making it, and I credit jnZ a lot with great production value.
Out of the hall of explorers, and up from the dusty tomb, they grab their whips and fedoras. These legends are the